Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Dave. Hope you're having a good week so far. Today we're talking a little bit about Rocket Lab. I feel like I am well past due to dive a little bit more into the numbers and see if we can kind of visualize and map out the growth trajectory of this company. We talk a lot about high-level concepts and where the growth is coming from and, the grand vision, but I do think we need to also drill down into the numbers, see what kind of growth rates we're getting, what kind of margins, make some predictions for the future. We're starting to get a pretty good idea of how 2024 will shape up at this point, getting pretty close towards the ends of the year. So I did update some of my numbers in terms of projections for the stock. Ultimately, obviously, it was downwards when it comes to Electron and launch, but Space Systems has been chugging along quite good, so that's definitely helped out. And I've changed my thinking a little bit now on Neutron and how that's going to ramp up just slightly. So let's dive into that and take a look at some of that data and charts. Before we get into that, though, I hope you will consider subscribing if you haven't already. Every new subscriber is extremely helpful to the channel, and if you aren't new here, I will be sure to check out your comments, and those likes always help out as well. Okay, with that out of the way, let's dive into Rocket Lab by the numbers. All right, so here we are in my handy dandy spreadsheet, and I figured it might make sense to show what the changes were I made. So on the right, we have a previous version. On the left, we have my more recent version that I was working on today. Starting off with launch, pretty clear in 2024, we won't be making that 22 number that we were originally hoping for. According to the most recent earnings call, the range we should probably think about is more like 15 to 18. So I've gone ahead and put 16 in there, a bit on the low end, I suppose, but they didn't really sound very confident at all in hitting 18. And I figured, better safe than sorry. Launch, generally they do have these customer delays, and 16 seems like a more likely number than 17, so that's what I put in there. ASP, average selling price or revenue per launch, I kept the same, 7.5. It's probably actually a little higher than that right now, but I'll leave it as it is. That means our total revenue for launch in 2024 drops from 165 projected at the start of the year down to 120, and the gross profit drops to about 36 million from 45 million based on a gross margin of roughly 30%. 30 for 22 launches was pretty low, actually. If you get the higher the cadence is, the better the margins are, because then you're paying for those fixed costs of launch infrastructure and employees and all that stuff across more launches, so your margin percentage actually gets better. I did fill in a little bit more historical data here in terms of gross profits historically over the past few years, and where I got this data is Rocket Lab's 10Q. Rocket Lab puts out their 10Q every year. I always look forward to it because there's tons of data in it, and I encourage you to check it out as well if you haven't already and you are an investor. But what I really like about this is it breaks down the revenue, cost of revenue, and gross profit each year, dividing it up between launch and space systems, and this just gives me a ton of granularity into the health of each business line and how they're doing. So that is where I got the data to input the historical years as well. I'm looking forward to obviously getting the 10Q for 2024 as well. These numbers are all, I'm just trying to be in the right ballpark when I do make these models and forecasts, guys. I know I'm never going to be exactly correct, but I just want to get an idea of, where I think things could be going. So yeah, gross profit was negative 14.85 million in 2021. With 6 launches. With 9 launches, it was negative 7-ish million. Then 2023 gross profit went positive 8 million on 10 launches. 2024, we're looking at 16 launches, and I'm thinking a positive 36 million, but we'll really have to wait and see on that. Just an estimate. So now I'm thinking for 2025 that maybe we're looking at 21 launches, just an estimate. Again, I'm trying to be safe here because every time I guess how many launches they're going to have in a year, it usually falls short. And, that's partly the company's guidance falling short as well. So just playing it safe here, maybe 2021, or sorry, maybe 21 is a safe number for 2025. Then 2026, we're looking at 26 launches. 2027, now I'm talking about 30 launches. Then 32, 34. As Adam has kind of said before, he thinks he can kind of see demand in the future getting to 30 and maybe low to mid 30s. He doesn't really see demand for 50 launches anytime soon, but 30s could be achievable. So that's kind of what I am charting out for. You can see the changes here, pretty slight. So I reduced the launches in next year by about 3, and then the following year by 2. Just kept it the same for 2027 and 32, and then I dropped it only by 1 for 2029. ASP's average selling price or revenue per launch, I've just been gradually increasing it because we've seen the trend of it going up over the years due to inflation and just demand and costs going up. So when you multiply out these numbers, what we now have for 2024 is 120 million with 36 in gross profit, and then 174 with 73 in gross profit. Out to 2029, where $187 million in gross profit on a $340 million revenue line. So, a nice little business, but it's never going to be, a massive company. Like, let me put it this way. If Electron is your primary product, you're never going to be a massive company. You're always going to be, you could have a nice little business, and there's nothing wrong with running a nice little business and generating a nice profit, but you're not going to be one of the giants of the space industry. So I also did slightly decrease margins going out into the future. I think I was a little too overly optimistic talking about hitting 60% gross margin in 2029. Decided to cap it at mid 50s, which is kind of what they're guiding for, more like 50% gross margin. So that is the change when it comes to Electron. Let me know what you think, how many launches you think they'll manage to hit next year for the remainder of this year, average selling prices, all the rest down below. Talking about Neutron now going way back, I did have one launch in 2024. Obviously, that got updated a while ago because we now know first launch will be 2025. Previously, I did put that there would be a paying customer on the first launch. I thought I had heard rumors that there was interest of that, but now I feel like probably safer to assume that there's no customer on the first launch, and if there does end up being one, it's just a bonus. Generally on first launches of rockets, you don't see a paying customer payload just because it's considered so risky for a brand new vehicle, and something could and usually does go wrong. So putting 0 revenue on the first launch in 2025, and I'm thinking only one launch in 2025. In previous earning calls and interviews, Peter and Adam have said they kind of foresee Neutron rising in a similar type of graph that Electron did in terms of cadence. So we're going to do here 1 launch 2025, then 3 in 2026, then, sorry about that. Then 6 in 2027, then 11, then 15. That's kind of how I'm thinking. Let me know if you think I'm being too aggressive on this. I did just decrease the 2029 launch number by 1 here, so not very much. And with that, I think we should be able to get rid of the previous version for now, just so we can have a little bit of a bigger view. Okay, so that is Electron and the launch revenue. We're going to look at some charts in a little bit, which I think should make things a little clear, but I just want to point out how quickly Neutron eclipses Electron when it comes to revenue as well as gross profits. By 2027, we're talking 6 Neutron launches versus 30 Electron launches. Neutron is now making more revenue than Electron. However, I don't have them reaching, positive gross margins until a little bit later. Again, they do have to pay for all those factories, manufacturing, launch infrastructure. So it's really once the cadence increases that you see the gross profits starting to take off for Neutron. And a couple years later, Neutron's gross profit just really dwarfs what Electron is providing. Let's take a look at a few charts now to really illustrate this point. Here we have Rocket Lab's launch revenue, and this is the data you were seeing previously. So Neutron obviously gets off to a slower start. Electron has been bringing in revenue since well before 2021 even, but that's how far I'm going back because that's when they went public. Neutron, so 2025 in terms of revenue, again, $0 for that first launch, assuming there's no customer. If there is, it's a bonus. Then we have 3 launches at 155-ish million, and it just scales so rapidly. I mean, that's the benefit of having $55 million per launch versus $8 million per launch. It's just massive, the difference. Really, explains why a lot of companies focus on that larger launch vehicle as opposed to the small one. The small one is a tougher business, but hopefully now that Rocket Lab has that experience eking out a profit with a small launch vehicle, it should be a lot easier to be profitable with a large launch vehicle when you have such a large sticker price to divide all those costs. And if you want to see them stacked, this is kind of what we're looking at. And then you can see the revenue there starting to get into the billions eventually instead of just millions. So exciting to see that. Of course, we're talking way out 2029, but that's the trajectory I'm thinking for launch. In terms of gross profit, it's a little different, right? So Electron was unprofitable 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and finally in 2023, we see a little gross profit. Now, of course, this doesn't mean the overall company was profitable because the gross profit line, has to cover selling, general, and admin, as well as research and development and all that before you start seeing a profitable business. But at least Electron was gross margin positive and growing in 2024. The projections is it continues to grow as the cadence and gross margin increases, but, it kind of levels off when we look at a mid-30s type cadence kind of maxing out, at least for the near term. Neutron 2026, we're looking at, as I said, 3 launches. I'm thinking it will be gross margin negative for 2026 as they have to pay for all that infrastructure, all those employees, factories, everything. And then the revenue from 3 launches won't be enough to cover all that. So it's in the negative for gross profit. 2027, I just put it around break even so that you can't really see anything there. Maybe I'm being too quick with the break even and it should take a little bit longer. Let me know what you think about that. Then, of course, 2028, the improvement is extremely rapid as the cadence increases and you have so much revenue for each launch. And it surpasses Electron in 2029. And not even just by a little bit, it way surpasses Electron. And here we are with a chart on the launch division, just the gross profit and revenue stacked. If you want to see kind of how much gross profits are being driven from the revenue, and that should improve over time as they scale. Just realizing now these were not very good colors because a little hard to tell the difference. Should have made that orange or something else. But there you go, is that chart. In terms of the space systems numbers for revenue, well, we've had the first 2 quarters in the books. The third quarter, we have guidance for it, and they generally are right on with guidance, so I have pretty good confidence that space systems revenue for Q3 will be between 79 to 84, and then I just kind of picked an average number for Q4 to come up with what I thought made sense for total space systems for 2024. In terms of margin, well, we do get it per quarter, GAAP gross margin, non-GAAP gross margin, and really, I'm just trying to get it in the right ballpark with some of these estimates. It doesn't have to be exact, but I just want to have an idea of where things are going. It's a little harder to project out into the future. Obviously, I can't just pick a number of launches that seems reasonable. So I have to basically guess a growth rate for space systems each year. And by the way, look at 2021 space systems. I didn't realize this before. Gross margin of 55%. This was before all those acquisitions, so I guess it was just probably Photon. And then the acquisitions come in, massive growth 2022, going up to 150 from 23. but the gross margins obviously take a hit as they absorb those less profitable businesses and try to increase the profit margins and scale quicker. So yeah, what I'm thinking for Space Systems 2025 and beyond is maybe a 30% annual growth rate. That seemed quite reasonable given the growth rates we've seen over time. And just some anecdotal data, maybe I'm being a little too bearish here even. I just like to be safe about these things. But you do see these news stories like Rocket Lab getting $40 million in funding to expand their Solero manufacturing footprint and work on, expanding their manufacturing in the United States. So obviously that will drive more growth and more revenue. They're talking about eventually selling their carbon fiber structures and building out carbon fiber for other people. So that can be a new business line as well. They have some cash on the balance sheet that they're planning to acquire other companies, which would presumably come with a revenue run rate of their own. So as soon as you acquire them, bam, there's some more revenue on your balance sheet. Hopefully those companies would be profitable already, but if not, I'm sure Rocket Lab is good at buying those in trouble, distressed assets and turning things around. So a lot of potential catalysts for growth in the space system side of the business in the future, including, of course, all these big contracts we keep seeing, SDA, Global Star, the big reaction wheel deal, and so much more. So, maybe I'm being too conservative here, but the space systems, very reliable, comes in every quarter, not as lumpy as launch. We did hear in a few earnings calls that maybe 40% is kind of a target for gross margin on space systems. So that's what I've entered here. You can see that while Space Systems is far outpacing launch right now, once Neutron gets going and it delivers more revenue per launch, it actually kind of catches up by 2029. So maybe another sign there that I'm a little too bearish when it comes to Space Systems and I should keep it outpacing Neutron. I think I have heard previously, though, that they see the two kind of drawing more even at some point down the line. So then, of course, we can total up the total revenues and figure out gross profits. Once you have the gross profit figure, you can, of course, try to calculate how much you think selling general and admin will be, as well as your R&D, and figure out an EBITDA. And you can also, from there, try to figure out a net income by also subtracting your taxes and your depreciation of assets, like your equipment and factories that lose value over time. They account for that as well. Now, once you have the net income figures, you can, try to figure out what a reasonable multiple for price to earnings would be and plan accordingly what you think the value will be worth in the future. That's not really the purpose of this video. We will kind of dive into that a little bit more later on, and I'm still not fully happy with the numbers that I'm coming up with here. But I will say, just in terms of the valuation side of things, I wanted to see what kind of growth these numbers would mean overall. And it's quite staggering, really. We're talking about 2024 looking like 70% growth over 2023. And then I have, more reasonable figures, but still very strong over the next few years. 33, 60, 40, 42, and 30, averaging out to almost 50% revenue growth, compound annual revenue growth every year, which is extremely good if you can sustain that over any period of time. Like, things grow exponentially if you keep compounding that same growth rate. So that is quite exciting. Still want to do a bit more math and a bit more thinking when it comes to expenses and SG&A, R&D. I'm not an expert on taxes either and how much these companies pay in taxes. Certainly not an expert on depreciation. So going to look at that more in the future when we update our valuation model, maybe at the end of the year, and final numbers for 2024, and come up with updates for what we think the company could be worth, down the line. I tend to like to look 5 years out because I am a long-term investor. So those are the charts I have for you today. I hope you did find them useful. I plan to keep making more of them, including, space systems versus launch and how that will play out. Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff we can do with the data, and I hope to dive into a bit more of that in the future. I'll probably be tweeting out a lot of these charts too. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I am Dave G Investing, and let me know what you think about any of these numbers, because I do take the feedback, and I have in the past many times actually said, that commenter is right. Maybe I should adjust this number down or up or whatever. So yeah, do let me know what you think and how many launches we'll be seeing of Neutron and Electron in the future. Always interested to hear. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, I hope you'll consider doing that. If you're already subscribed, well, thanks. You're the best. I hope you guys have a great day and a great rest of the week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.